Welcome to the You Are a Philanthropist podcast. Today we're talking with Megan Whitney. Since burning out a decade ago, Megan Whitney's mission has been preventing the same exhaustion for other women working in nonprofits. She leads a mindfulness community and coaches changemakers to build peaceful, healthy lives for themselves and others. At Feeding America, Megan has spent the past 7 years fighting hunger as a fundraising consultant, and meditation teacher. She lives in Chicago and loves taking walks by Lake Michigan, making fresh pasta with her niece, and enjoying the city's stellar stand-up comedy scene.
You are the kind of person who wants to improve the lives of others, but you need to take pride in your everyday actions. You Are a Philanthropist believes that every act of goodwill deserves to be recognized as philanthropy. Each individual action you take impacts another's life. Believe that what you do makes a difference. So call yourself a philanthropist and start a ripple effect of generosity that boomerangs back to you. Go to youareaphilanthropist.com/shop. Style your outside to match your inside. Choose a t-shirt, hoodie, or bag to show how much you love giving to others. That's youareaphilanthropist.com/shop.
Hey y'all, I just want to remind you that I need you to subscribe, rate, and review to this podcast. If you're enjoying it and want more conversations like this and want to help people get more involved with philanthropy, please subscribe, rate, and review. I want to thank you to the people who have already rated this podcast 5 stars. Please click to rate it 5 stars. And here is some awesome reviews. I love hearing the different stories from a variety of people's personalities. We all can contribute with the strengths we have in making the world a better place for all of us to live in. Here's another one. I really enjoy this podcast. It's encouraging to see that I don't have to be a multimillionaire who created a philanthropic foundation to impact people. It's my small gifts of my time and resources that add up. I am a philanthropist. And here's another. There are opportunities all around at an early age to remind us to look out for each other. It's a lifelong journey of seeing the opportunities and acting in them. Thanks for a great reminder. Listeners, please do me a favor, subscribe, rate, and review right now so more people can hear more from us and learn more about philanthropy.
Welcome to the You Are a Philanthropist podcast with Jen Klein, a certified fundraising executive and philanthropic entrepreneur. This show is dedicated to empowering and inspiring you to make a difference in your community and our world. Jen believes all acts of kindness matter, and this show is designed to help you take pride in your everyday actions of improving the lives of others and making a change in the world. Now, here's Jen.
Megan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jen. So delighted to be with you.
I'm delighted to have you here. I'm so glad we got connected on LinkedIn. You are so encouraging with your focus on helping others, both in your career as a fundraising consultant and at Feeding America, as well as your passion for mindset. Can you tell us how you got started?
Sure. Yeah, I really appreciate our shared interest in mindfulness and well-being and food security. So happy to share a little bit of my story. When I think about what first got me into social justice work, it is definitely the church that I grew up going to as a kid. So I was raised in a Christian family who really emphasized the values of serving others and did a lot of volunteering in my church's soup kitchen and the shelter that we ran, and did some mission trips as well in high school and in college. And I think for me, like many people who work in nonprofits, it never really felt like a question of, will I continue to do this work? It was more of how and what would that look like? So I studied abroad in college in England, and that led to my first job out of college working at a study abroad nonprofit. I had a speech communication major and a sociology minor and didn't really know what I would do with those degrees. So the study abroad fields seemed to really align with what I was interested in at the time, which was intercultural education and building world peace, really, which I think starts with people better understanding the world around them and developing these communication skills. I was at that nonprofit for about 8 years or so when I had a painful experience of burnout and really felt like I couldn't do anything except quit my job and take some time to refocus on my well-being. I was actually in a grad program at the time as well, and so was privileged to be able to take that space to focus on grad school. My program at DePaul was on nonprofit management, and that's where I took a course on resource development and discovered that I could be a fundraiser. So, like a lot of fundraisers, it wasn't something I considered going into and kind of fell into it. I also was teaching fresh pasta classes at the time and had a mentor who encouraged me to think about what do I really want to focus on as my passion and to get very specific rather than broadly applying for any nonprofit. So for me, I really had high hopes of working at Feeding America, partly because food insecurity is something that I've always been passionate about and have seen affect actual family members of mine. Had a family member who didn't went through an unexpected divorce and suddenly needed to use food stamps. And so I think that combined with my family all loving cooking just really made me want to work for an organization that's committed to helping people get the resources that they say they need to thrive, and that includes food. So I've been at Feeding America for the past 7 years. I will pause there as I've been talking a lot. But yeah, that's a bit about my story.
That's beautiful. As you know, I studied abroad as well in Australia. So that really resonates with me about the importance of doing that, especially when you have the time, when you're young. And I also resonate with burnout. I definitely became burnt out when I had my first child and he wasn't sleeping through the night. And that meant I wasn't either. And I had a full-time job on top of parenting. So I understand the challenges of working in the nonprofit space. And I also know the joys of working in the nonprofit space too, which I know is why we're still both in it. Since then, we've both found the balance, thankfully, to mindset practices. And for me, I work with Dr. Vinny Capetta, who was on my show earlier this season. And we practiced positive intelligence in a group program with him. Can you tell me about the mindfulness program that you've started?
Sure, I'd love to. I was actually just gathering with some of my friends through that program today. We meet twice a week on Zoom through the Feeding America network of food banks. So Feeding America, for folks who don't know, is the nation's largest hunger relief and food rescue nonprofit. And we're made up of a network of more than 200 food banks and 60,000 agencies, soup kitchens, food pantries, et cetera. And about 4 years ago, I took a program called Search Inside Yourself, which is a mindfulness and emotional intelligence-based leadership program. It started off at Google and it now has turned into its own nonprofit. And they also have a for-profit branch now. So I took that program as a student, and that was toward the beginning of COVID. And at the end of the program, they had us actually look at a mindfulness practice group starter kit, toolkit. And I thought, it's a stressful time for everyone in the world. I know I need to create more space in my day to practice mindfulness and breathe. And so I started off inviting folks in the EDI, which stands for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion group that I was in at Feeding America. And that really snowballed into me presenting about mindfulness at a conference for fundraisers, and then people in the network at food banks saying, "Hey, how can I join your group?" And so I've been really fortunate to have the leadership of about 3 other people who, actually it's 4 now, who lead with me. And it's really a space for people to take a pause in their workday. We meet on Tuesdays and Fridays, and they can show up on camera or off. They can engage as much or as little as they like. And I will either lead a live guided meditation for about 10 minutes or play a guided meditation. It's important to me that we have a diversity of teachers and voices as well. And then we have optional, what we call social meditation time for people to hang out if they want, just to chat and share about the experience and to authentically share how they're doing. So it's a really beautiful community, and I'm amazed at how much it's grown. And I'm glad that I didn't let my fear stop me from starting it. I remember when I started it, I was like, okay, well, I can do this now because I'm not traveling to food banks, because that's what I normally do pretty often for my job as a fundraising consultant. But what's going to happen when, we all go back more to the office and I'm traveling again? And we just had people step up, as often is the case, and we adapted, and I love it so much.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you invited me to the meditation program, and I know we can put it in the show notes about how to find that group so that more folks can practice mindfulness.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. So actually, what I invited you to has a very similar name, and it's a little different than what I just described. So after doing this group for 4 years at Feeding America, I really wanted to expand it out into the whole world. And since becoming a certified mindfulness teacher of the Search Inside Yourself program, I've started putting my meditations on this free app called Insight Timer. And so the group that I invited you to and would love anyone who's listening to join is called Mindfulness Community for Changemakers. And I run it a couple times a month at this point. We'll see how things grow on Insight Timer, which is the app that got me into meditation 6 years ago.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting my listeners and helping others in this way. Can you tell me where your inspiration and joy and passion come from helping others?
It's a great question. When you sent me some of the questions that you're going to ask in advance, this was one of them. And I was laughing because I was kind of like, I don't think about that so much. It's kind of like what I was saying before. It doesn't feel like something I've chosen. It's just kind of my identity. And I think, there's a few things that come up as far as where my passion and joy come from. I think one of them is that giving and helping others feels good. And I know that's something you believe in the work that you've done as well. There's a helper's high, and that's real. We love giving to other people, and we love receiving. And I think part of it comes from, again, the way I was raised in a church that's focused on social justice. Part of it is my nature of being, I would say, an Enneagram 2, which is a helper type. And so I really have a lot of joy from being able to help someone out or just make their day a little bit easier. And I think that when I was in my early 30s, that when I discovered mindfulness, that was when the piece around taking care of myself and understanding my own emotions, that really added a layer that wasn't there before in terms of my story of helping others. And so, that sounds kind of vague, but what I mean by that is I was raised to really focus on serving other people. And I don't think I learned how to serve myself or take care of myself until I was in my early 30s. And I learned through this program I've taught Search Inside Yourself that there's a real connection between self-awareness and empathy. And so it's difficult for us to empathize with other people's difficult emotions and experiences when we don't understand our own emotions or know how to actually feel them. So I'm really passionate about in this work that I do, like helping others understand that no emotion is bad and that we can learn to befriend our emotions, and that shaming ourselves and blaming ourselves or overworking, all of these conditioned habits that we've learned in a capitalist system, like we don't have to do that to ourselves. So, yeah, I could go in so many directions with this question. I think that we all belong to each other, and we need to do this work of interpersonal development on our own, and it's in service of the collective well-being as well.
That's so beautiful. I love your passion for helping others. I love that you experience the helper's high and that it boomerangs back to you. It's something I, as you know, wrote about in my book, Giving is Selfish. And I think it's so important to practice loving ourselves, like you're saying, in order to love others. And I like to balance it out in equal measure. For me, Jesus said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So we never want to be doing so much where we're neglecting ourselves, like you and I both experienced at one point in our early careers. And there's a balance. Can you talk with me more about loving yourself in order to love others?
Yeah, I'd love to. Let me take a moment to think about how I want to approach this question. So, one of the reasons why in my mindfulness coaching practice, I decided to help specifically women and nonprofits with preventing burnout is because of that experience of burning out myself. And I think that burnout affects way too many people, no matter what our gender is. And growing up being a woman myself, I think that women have specific ways of being conditioned in our society. And, some of the characteristics that I developed as, well, really, I don't want to say characteristics. I want to say habits, because I don't identify with these things as like who I am. They're more ways of protecting myself that I learned growing up. And so these things that I think many women are socialized to demonstrate are things like people pleasing, perfectionism, overachieving, just really focus focusing on trying to manage other people's emotions and to overhelp, which can result in, martyrdom, white saviorism. As a white person, I think a lot about that. And so these are things that I think I developed again as a way to keep myself safe and relied a lot upon external validation. I was one of those kids who was in 8 different extracurricular activities in high school and was a straight A student and really was striving a lot. And I have a lot of compassion for that one in me who was seeking validation from others and still do today. We're all human. It's part of how we're wired, right? And, for me to speak personally to my experience, because I know we're talking a lot about, nonprofit work, but we're all human beings, no matter whether we're sitting at our office desk or we're out at a party. And for me, I really saw these conditions show up when I was married. I really didn't know who I was or how to take care of myself or love myself, I think, when I first got married around 26 or 27. And so when I went through a divorce, and then found mindfulness, I went through a really difficult time of needing to work with emotions that were a roller coaster. And my therapist recommended meditating for 10 minutes a day as part of working with her. That was kind of her requirement, was that I needed to be willing to invest in myself. So I started doing it, and it didn't take long for me to realize how amazing it felt to be with myself in silence and to feel the emotions rather than deny them or suppress them, or numb them out with wine. So I just was opened up into a whole other realm of possibility for how I could live. And I think as I learned to give myself compassion, which is actually you can learn that. That's a skill, something I didn't understand before. There's self-compassion meditations and loving kindness meditations where you actually build this muscle of loving yourself and others. That then allowed me to connect more deeply with other people, going through that experience of a crisis in my own divorce. And then previous to that, burnout helped me develop more empathy for others, and just to recognize we all inherently want love and belonging. We all are seeking a sense of wholeness and want to be seen and heard. And so I really love creating spaces within these mindfulness communities and within the coaching work I'm doing for us to practice loving ourselves and in service of loving others.
Oh, I just love the vulnerability you shared with your personal story. And thank you so much for that. For me, with my positive intelligence group, I've only been in this program for 6 months. So I'm a newbie to practicing mindfulness, though not a newbie to therapy and mental health services, and which is so important. I'm so thankful that you brought that up, that's how you got into mindfulness, which is through the important work that therapists do as well to help people overcome mental challenges. And I'm curious if you could share more about your thoughts on how someone can get started with either putting themselves first or putting others first, depending on where in their life journey they're at. How could they get started with not just helping others, but helping themselves as well?
Sure. Well, first, I want to share one of my favorite quotes and pieces of inspiration around that topic. And this comes from Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams. And she said, without inner change, there can be no outer change. Without collective change, no change matters. And even as I say that quote out loud, I'm like, oh, it hits me. It's so powerful. So I think the inner work and the collective work are inextricable. We don't operate as humans who stay inside all day and don't talk to anyone else, right? So I taught this program, Search Inside Yourself, as well, which has this connotation that in order to show up for others, to be our best selves at work and in the world, we need to search inside our own selves. So, as far as your question, I believe, was how can we start with loving ourselves and then loving others? So, if you're listening and you feel like love is maybe a strong word to use, that is understandable. I've definitely worked with clients and have had my own journey of having a sense of difficulty of accessing full love for myself. So I might start by encouraging self-acceptance and self-compassion. So from a very practical standpoint, there's many ways to develop love for oneself. My own approach was that meditating every day is key. It's not a requirement, and I recognize that not everybody wants to create that space. And in order to rewire our brain and create new neural pathways, it's like going to the gym. So we don't get ripped with 3 push-ups. So we need to practice this skill and train our brain that it's okay to feel emotions. I won't go down too much of a rabbit hole around emotions, but I've learned so much about the link between loving ourselves and allowing ourselves to welcome in emotions as messengers and to allow them to be here and not blame ourselves for feeling that way or should ourselves into, feeling differently. So yeah, I think meditation is key. And if you're looking to get started, I highly recommend the Insight Timer app, which is free. There's plenty of apps out there. It's not cheating to use an app. And there's thousands of different kinds of meditations out there. So oftentimes people think meditation may be just feeling the sensations of your breath. And that's just one of many. So for developing self-love, Dr. Kristen Neff is a researcher and meditation teacher who has a lot of meditations around self-compassion. Tara Brach is another teacher that really has created a lot of work around self-compassion. And if 10 minutes sounds not feasible, I would encourage folks to not underestimate what it can do to take 1 minute of breathing. For me, I really value my morning practice, which involves not looking at my phone until after I meditate and after I do yoga or qigong or go to the gym. So journaling is another great mindfulness practice as well. But just, to back up, having a dedicated meditation practice is great. And then incorporating micro practices into your day are also amazing ways to support yourself, whether that's like a head, body, heart check-in, which I do throughout my day, checking in with my thoughts, the sensations in my body, and how I'm feeling. Man, you got me on a roll. So that's about a little piece of developing self-love, and it really grows over time. And I find that the more that I love myself and trust my ability to handle any reaction, the more confident I feel that I can put myself out there in service of loving others. I feel I've gained more of a sense of courage and bravery and a willingness to embrace discomfort and to speak my truth. And in order to change systems, we need people that feel that they have enough of a level of healing to be able to do that.
Oh, that was beautiful. We got to keep talking offline because you just taught me so much. And I love that you reference some other, Christine Neff. Is that what you said it was?
So Dr. Kristen Neff is one of many teachers that I love that focuses on self-compassion. And I also do think it's really important to acknowledge that these practices that Western science are just catching up with now as legitimately lowering stress and anxiety have been around over 2,500 years, originating in the Buddhist and Hindu cultures in India. So it's amazing to me, and I totally geek out on all the knowledge that's out there, that the fact that it's free too. We think one of the connections between my work at Feeding America and my work as a mindfulness coach is everybody needs to have equitable access to the resources they need to thrive. And most of us can breathe and have a brain. And so there's just so much we can learn out there about how to support ourselves.
That's wonderful. We could go into so much more. And I want to be mindful of the time we have today. And I definitely want my listeners to be able to reach out to you. And I know you're willing to help. Before we close, I was wondering if I could ask my favorite question, which is, what is your vision for a better world?
Of course. We definitely need to continue this conversation too. I want to hear more about your story and what's resonating with you.
Well, if I were to ask myself what my vision of a better world is, it would be a world without poverty. So I absolutely just love what Feeding America is doing and what you're doing to support them. So thank you for doing that important work. I've shared many times on this podcast that giving to my local food pantry by showing up on my neighbors' doorsteps and bringing their groceries to my food pantry with my children just every other month for the past 7 years has been quite the joy in my life.
Well, thank you for the work that you're doing to help support neighbors facing hunger. We need each other in this work. So I think for me, my vision for a better world is that everyone has access to the resources they say they need to thrive. And yeah, along with that, it's like the resources people need to thrive, that also includes information and support around mental health and well-being. It's all related.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, Megan, so much for being here. You are a wise woman. I can tell that the meditation practice you've been doing for the last 4 years has helped you reflect on life and your values and putting good into the world. Thank you so much for the work you do.
You're so welcome, Jen. Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun to chat, and I welcome anyone to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to connect and learn from each other.
Great. I'll have your links in the show notes. And if you just want to tell people how to get in touch with you.
Absolutely. My largest platform that I like to hang out on is LinkedIn. So you can look me up on LinkedIn.
Awesome, Megan. Thanks so much for your time.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Jen.